So Marc, you have in common with several very high-profile technology entrepreneurs is that you started at an incredibly early age. But you got the first part of technology innovation, obviously, at school, which was Mosaic. And how did that come around? Was that your idea? Was that something that you fell into?
Well, I got really lucky. So I got a job in school. One of my jobs when I was at Illinois as an undergrad was working for something called the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. And NCSA, as it was called, was one of four national supercomputing centers funded by the National Science Foundation. And in fact, they had basically been brought into being essentially by Al Gore. And so when Al Gore says that he created the internet in the Senate,
this is it.
There is actually a lot of truth to that. And what he meant was he funded the supercomputing centers, and the supercomputing centers, the four supercomputing centers, were the original primary nodes of what was called the NSF-net, which is now the internet. NSF-net basically turned into the internet as we know it today. So I was at one of the four sort of primary internet nodes at that time. And then it was also a supercomputer center, so we had all this funding for supercomputers. And then the group that I was in was developing software for scientists at other universities and colleges to be able to basically come in over the internet and use the supercomputers that the government was putting into place at Illinois. And so you could be a scientist, for example, a physicist at Purdue, and you could log in remotely into a Cray supercomputer at Illinois and use it. And so we were building software tools. And so we built software tools like Telnet and different versions of Telnet and FTP just to let people start to log into these things. And then I was working on a project, an official project that was a real-time collaboration tool, was my day job, working on part of a team to let scientists collaborate in real time over the network. And it was right around that time that the web was in its very earliest stages of inception. And so there were a small handful of websites. And if you had a Next computer, you could log on to your Next computer, and you could use a text mode browser, and it would sometimes work, and it sometimes crash. It was just kind of very experimental at that phase. And so a small group of us basically decided on nights and weekends to see if we could do something that would be really interesting around that, and that became Mosaic. And the idea was to do a graphical browser that works really well. So it was fully adapted to the modern GUI. Windows 3.0 had just come out at that point, and so we said, let's do it so it works really well on Windows, really well on the Mac, really well on Unix workstations, and really give ordinary people access to everything on the internet. And then also under the theory that if you had easy access, that would be an incentive for a lot more people to actually put content on the internet for ordinary people to use. And so we kind of had an idea that there was something important that could be done there.
And one of the things that I note about that era is that a lot of people did something similar at the same time. Mosaic was huge quickly, but did you think of the idea yourselves in this group, or had you seen somebody else do it?
Well, it was in the very early days of the web. So there was this idea of the web. There was this idea that there were common protocols. There was this idea that there would be browsers. It wasn't clear what form they would take. It wasn't clear what they would look like. It wasn't clear how they would act. It wasn't clear what capabilities they would have, what the user interface would be. And it wasn't at that point, I don't think, I think it wasn't clear that this would be something that ordinary people would ever use. There was a strong bias among the internet sort of community and developers at that time that the internet was for academics and researchers. And in fact, there was even a strong bias among a lot of people I knew against doing anything that would make it really easy for normal people to come in and use the internet because the theory was they would basically pollute it. And people may recall there was this huge controversy. AOL at a certain point hooked up its email system to the internet. And a lot of internet people got very upset at the idea of AOL people being able to email because that would pollute email. And so, I would say the sort of original thinking was that this is actually something that ordinary people are going to be able to use. Ordinary people, consumers, people at home, people who aren't, computer science students or PhDs or physicists. And so, that kind of crystallized. The initial people on the team were myself and my programming partner, Eric Bina, and he and I kind of, came up with the original idea for doing this. And then we extended the team to another, 4 or 5 key people, and then it just ballooned from there.